Hi, I'm Randy Wooden, and welcome to another in our Edge Library series. This is the topic of dealing with questions that you can ask an employer during the interview. We're on segment number 11. A lot of content we've covered in the other 10, all sorts of questions that you might want to ask. Some probably more critical, certainly in terms of understanding the job content, whether the goals and objectives of the position are something that are attainable and reasonable and things that you're interested in. We've also talked about how the company measures up to its competition and the selling points, relative pro and con of the company or the product, all sorts of things. Now we're going to talk about questions at the end of the interview. Now, at the end of the interview, it's almost like a movie. And there's a point in the interview, just like in a movie, where when the music and the violins start and the couple leans over, maybe across the dinner table, and you just know they're going to embrace. And same thing during an interview. At the end of this interview, there's that point where you kind of know that, gosh, you know what? I'm out of questions. I don't really have any more. The employer's already done with their questions, and it's somebody needs to take the lead and says, well, great, thank you for coming in. And we're kind of at that point where things are over with and it's time to move on. So you're right about at that point, and if you've been asking some questions at the end of the interview, whether they jump in and say, Randy, I appreciate you coming in and just wanted to thank you for sharing your background, whatever that little segue happens to be, I think it could be good to at that point say essentially, are there any other questions that you had for me that you'd not gotten a chance to ask me? And let them answer. Chances are they'll say no. I mean, it was a good exchange of information, and you say, well, great. Well, and that's when you go into your close. Essentially, well, great, I appreciate the chance to come in. I feel like I understand what you're looking for, and I'm very comfortable and confident that I can do a good job for you. Then I would ask, what is the next step? Now, again, the employer may have already told you what the next step was, but if they haven't, it's critical, I feel, to understand what that next step looks like. It might be a return to the company. It might be you'll wait for an offer. I don't know. But understand what that next step is and when it's likely to occur. And once they've essentially told you what that timeline looks like, then I want to say, well, great, I look to hear back from you. And then you want to ask one other question, and that would be that if I haven't heard from you by then, would it be all right for me to contact you? The reason you want to do this, and it's something I allude to in workshops and also in other library segments, is called keeping control. Keeping control of the process. And if you leave an interview and you don't know what the next step is and when, that's bad. But if you know what the next step is, let's say they tell you, well, it'll be about a week or maybe 2 weeks or whatever they tell you. If all you know is, okay, a week goes by, and I haven't heard anything, what do I do now? See, in this case, if you've asked if it's okay for you to follow up with them, you can then, with some confidence, call, and when you get that receptionist, you can say that I spoke with John Doe, and he asked me to call him today to follow up on our discussion from last week. It sounds more authoritative than simply, well, I was following up on my interview from last week. Again, you have permission to call back. So I feel like that's a good thing. You want to know what to do when, let's say, 5 o'clock Friday rolls around and they said, we'll let you know something that week. Now you know that come Monday, you're well within your rights to be able to call back, and you may only get voicemail, and if you do, then we've covered that in other segments as well and how to handle that. But just know that it's a good idea to ask questions at the end of the interview. It helps to conclude the interview in a positive way, and now you know what the next step is and when. And that'll wrap it up for this in our Edge Library series, dealing with job hunters and the question about, well, what questions do I really want to ask that employer when I'm across the table from them? This was segment 11. I'm Randy Wooden. Thanks for watching.